Hi everyone. May 2017 was an amazing month in terms of the news, and our Farsight remote viewers did an amazing job at reporting the news to you a month in advance. Here's a summary of how we did for May 2017. Again, the basics of the project. Remote viewers working at the Farsight Institute in our ongoing and monthly Time Cross project predicted in significant detail the major news events for May 2017 using remote viewing, all done and published on YouTube for all to see at the end of April 2017, the previous month. On the last day of every month, we publish these remote viewing predictions for the coming month. Also, remember to keep track of the major news events for each month by visiting our news analysis table that we publish and update daily on our website. We had 4 remote viewers working for May's edition of the Time Cross project: Dick Allgaier, Princess Janae, Melina Hall, and Aziz Brown. So, starting with Dick Allgaier, and as he often does, he began by reporting a number of brief perceptions that he calls tagging. Now, these are not full remote viewing sessions, just perceptions that are essentially brief mental images relating to various events that will happen the following month. He also did one full remote viewing session, which I will discuss in a moment. In Dick's first tagging exercise, he perceives rioting in an urban setting. Well, that is exactly how the month of May started out. On May 1st, there were May Day protests in a great many urban locations around the world. The riots were vigorous, to say the least, mostly protesting worker and immigrant rights. The riots were covered extensively with video by many mainstream news outlets, including The Guardian, CNN, NBC, Reuters, The New York Times, and so on. And the 2017 riots even have an entry in Wikipedia. Now, for Dick's second tagging exercise, he perceives female royalty and tabloid fodder. Well, on May 3rd, the court case began of Kate Middleton and her husband Prince William suing a French tabloid over topless photos taken with a telephoto lens during a royal vacation. The case was a big news item with lots of coverage. For Dick's third tagging exercise, Dick perceives Julian Assange in a box, meaning that the issues of Julian Assange's confinement would be in the news again in May. Well, as it turns out, on May 19th, Sweden dropped the Julian Assange rape investigation, and the topic of whether or not Mr. Assange will eventually be able to leave his confinement in the Ecuadorian embassy in London was big news. Now, for Dick's full remote viewing session, he perceives what appears to be an invasion on land but near water. There are special forces, helicopters, troops, fanning out, live gunfire, booms, explosions, tanks, and the works, all in a foreign land. The remote viewing session seemed like a full conventional military battle. Oddly, for me at least, Dick describes this event as essentially one-sided. That is, there is military action in his data, an attack, but there is no description of a response from the other side, no enemy. Well, I have to admit that I was puzzled about this perception, especially as the month wore on. This was a big conventional battle with all the accessories, and I did not see much news about any country invading another country. Until on May 25th, RT plus a few Taiwanese news outlets reported on major Taiwanese war games with live ammunition to a simulated potential invasion by mainland China. Ships, helicopters, troops, and the works were involved. It was a huge military display, and it apparently was not covered by most Western news outlets, at least none that we found. A military attack that encounters no enemy, as Dick portrays it, totally fits with the idea of war games, as compared with an actual invasion. Now, following the presentation of Dick's remote viewing data for May, we also presented sessions by Melina Hall and Aziz Brown. I initially thought that those sessions were related to the invasion scenario that Dick depicted, but it turns out that this was not the case. Melina Hall presented a presidential address to troops and supporters in an outside stadium. The troops were lined up in front of the stage, and the civilian reporters were in the back. As it turns out, Melina exactly described the address that President Trump gave at the U.S. Coast Guard commencement in New London, Connecticut on May 17th. Melina's drawings of the event are so accurate, it feels like she was physically there. Also, her probes of President Trump's mind indicated that he had a complicated set of emotions that included deep fear. Well, that was the address where President Trump spent a considerable amount of time bemoaning the attacks that were being made on him in the media and in Washington. Now, for Aziz Brown's first remote viewing session, he clearly describes a naval attack on a coast, where a surface boat fires a missile over water and land, where it eventually hits a structure on land. He states that the launch involves a very loud sound and that the missile had to travel a long distance to get to its target. To be honest, throughout the month of May, I could not see anything in the news that fit that description. Until the last day. On May 31st, the last day of the month, the Russian Navy fired Caliber cruise missiles from the Mediterranean Sea at ISIS positions in Palmyra, Syria, from both surface ships and submarines. Video released from the Russian Ministry of Defense clearly shows this event fully, and it totally matches what Aziz described. Now, in terms of Aziz's second session, he describes an interaction between what he perceives as a submarine and a surface ship, where it appears that the submarine attacks the surface ship with a projectile or cruise missile. Now, this is a situation which we do not have any news reports that match this. Remember, there are lots of things that happen in the world that we do not see reported in the Western media, and a lot of military stuff happened in May, especially with Russian submarines firing cruise missiles in the Mediterranean. But if that event that Aziz describes did happen, in which the missile from a submarine hits a surface boat, we have no way to confirm it. So Aziz's second remote viewing session will have to remain inconclusive. Now, continuing in the order in which the remote viewing sessions for May were reported, Melina Hall presented a session involving an urban area with severe water pollution. The water comes from a large body of water, such as a lake. The severe contamination results in respiratory distress and serious rashes on the part of the residents in this city. There is stench, including lots of sewage smells. Melina clearly states that the news media is reporting on the event and local authorities are doing what they can to address the issue of protecting the residents, all without significant success, it seems. Well, as it turns out, this was another major event that we had to wait for until the end of the month. On May 31st, it was finally reported in the news that residents in the city of Bangalore, India, were being exposed to massive levels of toxic pollution in the form of foam that was rising up out of Varthur Lake. The scale of the invasion of pollution cannot be overstated. The toxic foam was everywhere, in the streets, on the buildings, piled many feet high, blowing around. It was everywhere, and there was stench. A very unusual remote viewing report and a very unusual event, all a perfect match. Finally, Princess Genet presented two predictive remote viewing reports for May 2017. In her first remote viewing session, she reported on a sudden water event involving serious flooding. She states that the event may involve the breakage of some barrier like a dam. Well, as it turns out, May was a month where there was historic rainfall and flooding in the Midwestern United States and Canada, heavily reported in the news during the first half of the month. In fact, there was a levee break on the Black River near Pocahontas, Arkansas, that resulted in the sudden submersion of huge tracts of farm acreage. Again, we are talking about historic flooding, not a rainy day. The insurance industry sometimes calls these 100-year floods. So, from the perspective of the basic elements of Princess's report, she perceived extraordinarily serious flooding and the breakage of a water barrier, and that is indeed what happened on historic levels in May. For Princess Genet's second remote viewing session, she reports on an aircraft crash in or on water in an isolated area, not close to land. The aircraft experiences a rumbling sound and then brakes for some reason in the air, followed by a crash. This is not a terrorist event. Again, the aircraft brakes and then crashes. It is also not in a place where it can be easily found. There are bodies in the water, oil, wreckage. There are also water animals that come to the surface at the site, reminding one of sharks or dolphins. The water is salty, suggesting an ocean, possibly tropical. Princess reports that the wreckage is eventually found, but not right away. Well, there were lots of plane crashes in May, mostly small planes crashing on land. But there was one plane crash that happened in May 2017 that closely resembles this report, and that is the crash of a plane carrying 4 New Yorkers near the Bahamas while traveling between Puerto Rico and Florida. The debris from what appears to have been the plane were found, but not right away, around May 16th. Last we heard, the Coast Guard continued to search for quite a while, covering an area of over 8,200 square miles. Again, we do not know why the plane crashed, and without more information about the crash, we cannot state anything more definitive. Nonetheless, in terms of the basics, the situation, as reported in the news, appears to closely match much of what Princess Genet described in her report. So that is how we did for predicting the major news events for May 2017, all with remote viewing sessions conducted and published on YouTube for all to see in April 2017. It is interesting to note that the 2 big ticket items in the news for May, items with the largest news coverage as reported in our news analysis table, were the various scandals surrounding President Trump and the White House staff, as well as the suicide bomber terror attack in Manchester, England during the Ariana Grande concert. But the scandals surrounding President Trump are so, shall we say, routine these days. They are pretty predictable and thus nearly scheduled events. They are also very diffuse, involving so many different people and happenings. Good remote viewing targets need to have a level of specificity, a time, date, place, a singular event. So the current White House scandals should probably not be considered as part of the Time Cross project, since scheduled events are prohibited and poorly defined events are not good targets. So unless a presidential scandal is truly unexpected or surprising, a clear, unique, and standalone event, then it is probably okay for these scandals not to appear in our remote viewing data. As for the suicide bombing at the Ariana Grande concert, well, suicide events are so common these days. They are happening a few times a month. They have become predictable, nearly scheduled. Predictable or scheduled events are prohibited in our project. So, as with the White House scandals, unless a terrorist event is unusual in some way, somehow unique to separate it from the other terrorist events, we should probably consider terrorist events as predictable and thus scheduled, and thus not part of our targeting process any longer. Having wrapped that up, I want to thank you so much for following our experiment. Note that we also have a new Mysteries project coming out on June 15th in just a few days, Remote Viewing Area 51. This is going to be a blockbuster. If you have ever wondered what was really down there under Area 51 in the Nevada desert, now is your chance to find out. Also, be warned that whatever you thought was probably there was not nearly enough. The secret ends on June 15th. Also, if you have not already done so, I hope you also get a chance to watch our recently released Mysteries project on the Roswell UFO crash. It is 3 hours of spine-tingling detail from 3 great remote viewers. And do remember to watch our other Mysteries projects, such as the investigations into the 9/11 events, the assassinations of John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King, the psychology of Adolf Hitler, and some amazing explorations into UFOs and extraterrestrial life. As always, all Farsight remote viewing work is done solo under totally blind conditions with no communication between any of the remote viewers. It is also good to remember that when you watch our Mysteries projects, you are helping us at Farsight do our work, including the funding for our Time Cross project, which we offer for free to the public, but which costs us a few $1,000s to do each month. We have no other significant source of income to pay the bills, so you really help when you follow and watch our activities and research. Finally, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Farsight Press, to keep up with the latest. And there is nothing like Farsight anywhere else on the internet. You can find information about all of our present and past activities on our website. Also on our website, sign up for our free email newsletter where we announce all our major projects. Stay ahead of the curve. Let the mainstream fade in the dust. Be there now.